Okay, so Assassin's Creed Odyssey is just an exhausting game. That's the prevailing feeling I had through the majority of my playthrough. And what's strange is that on paper, this game sounds fantastic. And as someone who's studied a fair share of ancient Greek history and mythology, an Assassin's Creed game set during the Peloponnesian War was, to me at least, very exciting. Unfortunately, the game wears itself too thin over the course of its story, and by the 20th hour, the game really started to become a chore. To the game's credit, the opening hours are pretty strong, and had me genuinely excited to see where it was going. Starting with the tutorial as Leonidas and ripping through enemies made for an awesome first impression of the combat, and beginning your adventure on Kefalonia does a great job of easing you into the world and the characters. Climbing that statue of Zeus and seeing the view of the world was an awe-inspiring moment, but when I opened up the map and saw how large the world was, I had two thoughts. One, this map is gigantic, and two, this is going to take a while. Unlike previous Assassin's Creed titles, Odyssey really tries to be an open-world RPG, with the main new additions to its core gameplay experience being player choice and making your own story. The first choice being whether you want to play as a male character or a female character, either Alexios or Cassandra. Throughout the campaign, you get dialogue choices that affect the outcome of the story. Unfortunately, these choices never managed to hold the emotional weight that they were certainly aiming for. I never felt like I had to weigh the options and really think about what I wanted to do. I never regretted any choice I made, and I never thought, I wonder how things would have been different if I made X choice. And the times I felt I made a decision that went against what someone wanted, there didn't seem to be any real consequence to what I did. It's clear that Odyssey wanted to be something like The Witcher, but unfortunately, it doesn't have the writing chops to deliver on its story, characters, and narrative choices. Gameplay holds up a bit better than the story and offers the usual Assassin's Creed experience, with combat, stealth, and parkour being the main pillars of gameplay. Gaining experience and skill tree customization for hunting, combat, and stealth also make a return from Origins. However, Odyssey allows you now to gain access to special abilities that can be put onto an ability wheel, where you have to use your adrenaline to use those abilities. It adds some nice customization options as it allows you to focus in on how you want your character to play. Combat felt the most at home with the RPG mechanics, and using skills like shield breaking and Spartan kicks was mostly fun, although at a certain point I found myself not experimenting with new skills and relied only on a select few. Combat itself has got a light Dark Souls scene going on, focusing on attacking, parrying, and moving around your opponents. And while the combat can be fun, it's not especially deep, and the finicky lock on camera only really adds frustration. Stealth, on the other hand, felt at odds with the RPG mechanics, because unless you really invest in the stealth skill tree, there's not really a guarantee that going for a stealth kill will actually take down an enemy, and this is especially true when dealing with stronger enemies, which seems at odds with what stealth gameplay should be, and it's just kind of unsatisfying that a stealth kill might not work simply because you haven't leveled up a skill yet. And while I certainly had fun at times with the stealth, and that rushing assassination skill is actually kind of satisfying, I always just wished that the stealth wasn't tied down by these RPG mechanics. Parkour still looks cool in motion, and climbing around historically accurate ancient cities has always been a strong point of the series. It, however, still suffers from all the same problems that parkour had in previous games, whether it's accidentally getting hitched up on an obstacle and having your momentum slow to a crawl, or the game not really being clear on what you can and can't climb. These problems have all been present in previous titles, and it's annoying to see that they are still here over 10 years later. And while I do love the fact that you now no longer die from fall damage, it can't really make up from these previously mentioned problems. Naval ships also make a return in Odyssey and are largely the same as previous entries, with the only major difference being swapping out cannonballs for arrows and javelins. You still upgrade your ship with crafting materials and can even recruit new members to your ship by either doing side quests or by knocking enemies out and forcing them to join, which is kinda hilarious. Boarding enemy ships was still fun, and there was something oddly satisfying about Sparta kicking people off into the ocean. However, as my journey went on and on and on, I found myself becoming less and less interested, and it eventually got to the point where I was simply fast traveling around instead. Conquest battles are new in Odyssey, and are essentially large-scale battles where you get to fight for either Sparta or Athens, and they become available once you diminish the dominating faction's presence in each part of the world map. Killing enemy soldiers, burning war supplies, stealing treasures, and killing the leader all help in bringing down the empowered faction. However, while I enjoyed doing the steps to get to the conquest battles, I only really enjoyed the conquest battles themselves a handful of times, as they ultimately didn't really feel worthwhile, and didn't really seem to change the gameplay or narrative experience. I have to give credit to Odyssey for two systems I genuinely really enjoyed, and that's the mercenary system and the Cult of Cosmos system. The mercenary system is tied to your notoriety, and as you break laws like stealing or openly killing guards or civilians, this will cause your notoriety to raise. Once reaching a certain level, a bounty will be placed on your head and mercenaries will start tracking you. They are essentially unique elite enemies and can really give you a run for your money if dealing with multiple at a time. Once a bounty is placed on your head, you can either pay off the bounty, kill the patron, or kill the mercenary. What I love is that mercenaries can just be roaming the open world without there being a bounty on your head, and that helps them feel as if they are part of the open world itself. Following this is the Cult of Cosmos system, which is heavily tied in with the overarching story and gives your character a structured list of targets to kill. However, things aren't so simple. You have to find clues to unveil your targets before you can track them, which comes from questing, finding clues, and killing other cultists. I love the fact that depending on how much questing you've done, by the time the system is incorporated, you may have actually already killed some targets. It really helps sell the idea that the cult is really ingrained in the world of Odyssey, and it's not just, oh, okay, now you can start encountering cultists because you've reached the story point. Both the Mercenary and Cult of Cosmos are great additions to the Assassin's Creed formula, even if they're just simplified versions of the Nemesis system from the Middle-earth series. Engraving is a new system in Odyssey, and it allows you to add stats to the weapons and armor you acquired, provided you have the appropriate materials. But personally, I never found much use for this system, and I only really engaged with it a handful of times. I prefer to simply just upgrade my weapons and armor instead of using this engraving system. Open world structure doesn't stray too far from the formula and is divided into main quests, side quests, and exploration. The story itself is divided into 3 major quest lines. The main story deals with your family, and it takes you to ancient Greek cities like Athens and Sparta. Along the way, you'll also meet historical figures such as Herodotus, Socrates, and Pericles, to name a few. It's always a treat to see how the series incorporates historical figures, and Odyssey is no exception. The Cult of Cosmos and the First Civilization story are the other 2 major quest lines. The former primarily dealing with the cult as a gameplay system, while the latter dealing with hidden artifacts in the open world. And unfortunately, the First Civilization and the Animus aspect of the story felt really tacked on in this game, to the point where I was questioning if it even should be still part of the series going forward. Side quests, treasure hunting, and exploration make up the rest of the open world, and while there's certainly a lot to do, it can just feel really overwhelming, and at a certain point, it just kind of starts feeling like busy work rather than quality content. From a presentation standpoint, Odyssey looks pretty good. The character models for the main characters are highly detailed and are well acted across the board. This is especially true of Cassandra. The attention to historical detail has always been a strong point to the series, and Odyssey is no different in that regard. That being said, there was never really those moments where I thought to myself, oh wow, this game looks unbelievable. It also doesn't help that this game has technical issues, and during my playthrough I encountered glitches, and several times the frame rate dropped to an absolute crawl. While there's certain fun to be had with Odyssey, and the Mercenary and Cult of Cosmos systems are legitimately great additions, the core gameplay wears itself too thin, the open world itself is overwhelming, and more importantly, the core story and narrative choices never really manages to come together to deliver a satisfying experience. I can only really recommend Odyssey to those who loved Origins, or if you just want a passable open world RPG to sink a lot of time into. To everyone else, this is probably a skip. And that about does it here for Ceej Gaming. If you enjoyed what you saw, please be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe for future videos. And if you want to keep up to date with this channel on social media, you can do so by following @Ceej Gaming on Twitter. Once again, this has been Ceej Gaming, and I'll see you guys next time.